Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next comment or question comes from Andreas Fargo, and this is in response to Ensoniq SQ2 in the Sun, a video I did in June 2021. And Andreas writes, is it possible to run this one as a MIDI controller? I've seen the two MIDI to one USB cables. Do they work? Well, in short answer, yes, you can run any MIDI-able keyboard as a MIDI controller, as long as it has a MIDI out. And the Ensoniq SQ2 is really no different. However, you've got to look at it from a slightly different point of view, which is it does not really cater for the wider functions of a MIDI controller that you typically would get from a dedicated box. It doesn't. You can't create keyboard zones, patch commands, sending different information on different channels, etc. So you've got to kind of look at the other things you want to do. If you're just looking for something to play notes, fine. What I would say is if you're looking for something like this, the Roland D70 is a good bet if you can pick one up. Good 76 keyboard, nice feel to the 76 keys. But this did allow you to do some of the higher MIDI functions, and I personally used the Roland D70 for quite a while as a MIDI keyboard in my setup, just purely because it was actually not a bad MIDI controller, and especially with the faders on the front, you could fade in and out different parts, which was really good. If you're looking for a non-USB MIDI controller, there were a number of models produced from people like M Audio, Alsys, Cheetah, rising up to the sort of top of the range boards like the Roland A80 or the Yamaha KX88. But it all depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, the Yamaha A80, believe me, is a top-notch MIDI controller. Can't do any, it has no sounds on it, but what you want to do is a proper piano-weighted MIDI controller, the Roland A80 is a stonking piece of kit if you can find one, and if you are a championship weightlifter, because it weighs a ton. So the bottom line is any keyboard really can perform the function. It really comes down to what are you trying to do, the feel of the key bed that you are playing, i.e. do you want it weighted, do you want it semi-weighted, do you want it synth action, and how much basically are you prepared to pay. I should say I've got nothing against USB controllers, but will not perform all their operations without being plugged into a computer. And this is why, again, going back to the Roland A80, which I have in storage, is such a corking machine, because you can configure all your patches up on the Roland A80, and then you don't need a computer to be able to execute everything. The Roland A80 will do it all for you. And that's one of the biggest problems with kind of MIDI controllers is nowadays manufacturers, what they do is they expect you to have a computer and they put the higher functions in the computer, or they expect you to be linking into a DAW and using the DAW functions rather than using the keyboard to perform those functions. So again, that's typically the cheaper end of the MIDI controller market is kind of that way orientated. But hopefully that gives you some food for thought on that one. This next comment/question comes from Mini Moog, and this is in response to Muse Receptor Round 1 to the Clone video I did in February 2022. And Midi Moog writes, The front USB port was intended as a slot for the iLOK first generation. Now, people who don't know what an iLOK was, it's effectively an encrypted USB key that a lot of manufacturers use to allow you to download the licenses, so you don't have to be connected to the internet to run software products. I've got an iLOK. I think I've only got one thing on the iLOK, which is Pro Tools, and I don't use Pro Tools anymore. Anyway, but that's why it's deeply recessed. It reduces the length of the stick that's sticking out of the front. Makes a lot of sense. Similarly, the upside down connector must have something to do with the iLOK. That's just my guess, of course. The iLOK had a serial number labelled on the rear side and the back, and you were asked to input the serial number when you add an authorisation code. Yeah, remember doing that. The upside down USB connector helps you read the serial number. Another theory. The iLOK had a bright LED on the front side which seemed to blink randomly out of beat, of course. That was most annoying during live performances, so they decided to face it downwards. I guess that was another assumption, was it, Minimog? I have to be honest. Until I read this, I didn't know that the iLOK that was really developed for the iLOK. I can see it now. Now that you said it, you learn something new every day. So now that you said that, I can see how the iLOK would possibly be required for some of the big software VST suites, possibly Contact, possibly Omnisphere, probably something else that you could get and load into the hardware itself. So I kind of get that, but I've just not come across any software that can potentially be loaded onto the Muse platform that actually needs that sort of thing anyway now. But there you go. And while your theory is a guess, it's not a bad theory. Those theories they're not without merit, shall we say. On the other hand, random flashing LED put out of view to prevent temperamental musician launching the rack through the window is also a good one. Well, like most musicians, if you've been around temperamental musicians, and I have in the past, I've seen guitars go through studio windows for menial and petty things in the past. I also remember seeing a rather expensive keyboard go hurling down a set of stairs by one disgruntled keyboard player. I can assure you it didn't work afterwards, by the way. However, we kind of leave those sort of temperamental things to people who are more temperamental than keyboard players. I tend to find keyboard players tend to be quite reserved, and it tends to be the guitarists and the frontmen who are the ones that have more testosterone flying around, shall we say, during the making and performing of music. And I'll leave it at that.